Our water connection acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and their connection to country, sky, water, and community. We extend our respect to the traditional custodians of the place where you are listening. This episode is recorded in Ghana country and Kabi Kabi country. What does it look like to shape an engineering career across continents, communities, and causes, all through water? How do you build a career that is not only diverse, but deeply meaningful? Is the water sector ready to think differently about partnerships, inclusion, and long-term impact? Today, we dive into a career that shows just how far water can take you, with stories of engineering, impact, and the power of saying yes to new challenges. My name is Jess Bordicus. I'm on a mission to increase your water curiosity, and this is our Water Connection. Today's episode is a little different. So instead of focusing on a single topic, which is what we normally do, we're shining a light on one person's career. Because sometimes a story can teach us just as much as a subject. We're exploring what a truly diverse and purpose-driven career in water can look like. Today, I'm grateful and very honored to be joined by Daniel Lambert AM. Daniel, or Dan, we'll see how we go, is a dynamic leader with a passion for innovation, partnerships, and developing sustainable water solutions that enable decarbonization. He's currently the managing director of Legacy, a water infrastructure developer focused on delivering reliable supply for the resources sector, but through ethical partnership models. Recognized as an industry thought leader, Daniel's contribution to innovation, sustainability, and the water sector has been profound. He has worked in over 25 countries and delivered first-of-a-kind solutions for recycled water, water resilience, and desalination projects. As you can already imagine, Daniel has been recognized on multiple occasions for his contributions to the engineering profession and the water sector. But more recently, in June this year, Daniel was appointed a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to engineering, particularly to the water sector and professional associations. So yeah, I'm very, very excited and happy to have Daniel today in our Water Connection. Welcome to our Water Connection, Dan.
Thanks, Jess. Great to be here.
No, it's great. And I think this introduction already sets the scene of what it would be a wonderful conversation. So I want to start with a quick question. Do you remember when you first became interested in water as a career?
Yes, big question, and I often describe it as a little bit of a journey. When I was at school, I loved solving problems. I loved science and maths, and when I finished high school, I decided to study science engineering, and really it was because it was a broad degree, lots of different pathways. I was at Monash and first year was general, so I didn't know what type of engineering I wanted to do. And I loved the course, studied it, but when I came out of university, I ended up backpacking around South America for 6 months.
Oh.
And I ended up in Ecuador.
Yeah.
So spent time volunteering with a not-for-profit over there, working in the Quechua communities up in the hills around Quito. And I describe it as a bit of a head to the heart moment where I'd learned a lot about engineering, loved solving problems, loved the sort of ability to sort of create solutions. But while I was there, we worked with communities, planning, designing, and then living in the communities, constructing water supply and sanitation systems, and hearing their stories, being a part of their lives for a period of time, and then really literally seeing tears in their eyes when we commissioned the system and the difference it made for them, sort of made me realize the huge social impact that we can have as water professionals. And that really led me down a path of sort of continuing on the water profession, but really probably having a strong focus throughout my life on people and the environment, and feeling a really strong heart connection with what I do, as well as enjoying the challenges of solving problems and working in teams.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful kind of join of like you had an interest in solving problems and an engineering field, but it's through that experience that you had in South America that showed you kind of that part of, yeah, the water sector. I do have to ask, did you go to Colombia?
I did not, and I went back then. It was probably different. Colombia was at a different stage, but
Yes.
it's one of those places I've always wanted to go to, and it's on my it's on my bucket list.
Good, good. Let me know next time that you go, and then I'm happy to give you recommendations.
Yeah,
This
that'd be
is
wonderful.
completely off script, but I had to ask.
Yeah, of
Because yeah, it's
course.
really really nice that that you found that in Ecuador, which is a country that is very close to my heart
We
as
got,
well. We used
mm,
to be one big country back in the day, so
yeah,
yeah, we're very very similar. So
amazing.
definitely.
Yeah,
It's great to
wonderful.
see like that. Yeah, as you say, kind of that platform that the water sector gives you, kind of to really have an impact in the communities, which was one of the other questions that I had. And how was like getting back into maybe Australia and kind of finding your way into applying maybe those skills that you had there more on kind of on a community side projects into a
Mm.
place like Australia.
Yeah, good question. I think so. I grew up in Melbourne and was traveling from there. When I moved back, I started a graduate role at Melbourne Water, and in that role, is probably I was out in the field a lot, working on wetlands and water sensitive urban design solutions, but also on treatment plants. And I think that it was very easy to feel the. I probably felt when I was in Ecuador, I really felt that social outcome perspective. When I was at Melbourne Water, I really felt that environmental outcome perspective. So it probably helped round off some of that heart connection, but also that really holistic impact that we can have. So I'd say it was complementary. I think throughout my career from that point on, though, I've always felt like I don't have to have my. And this is probably advice for anyone earlier on in their career. You don't have to sort of stick to one aspect of industry for your entire life. And I've, as you mentioned earlier, been fortunate to work in a lot of different countries, and for me, it sparks my passion every time I go into a developing country and get to spend time in community and get to really see that we can help the poorest of the poor, and we can really have a transformational impact. So I often feel in the developed parts of Australia, I feel I see the social connection as well, but the environmental impact is something that's really evident,
Yeah.
and the social side, I think, something that I encourage everyone to spend time. We've got an amazing world we live in, and so many different amazing cultures and communities, and we're in a unique profession where we can have an impact in that space.
Yeah, that's right. And like yeah, we'll go a little bit more into the details of other things that you have been involved, but like it looks like you have constantly kind of embraced new challenges and new ways of applying your career. What sort of mindset has helped you kind of taking those leaps in like taking exactly that advice that you're giving now, which is like not staying into one area, but like being flexible to jump around?
I think we often have choices in our career, and sometimes opportunities come and present themselves to us. And so I always encourage people to take risks, step outside your comfort zone. You learn more when you're really challenging yourself, but also actively seek them out. So opportunities don't always come and meet you head on. So spend time thinking about, and your why will evolve over your career, but spend time thinking about your why, what really drives you as a person, what inspires you, what sparks you, and then look at, well, what are the things outside of your immediate sphere that and areas and that you can grow in, people that you can connect with to potentially open doors, what's training that you can do, what are those different challenges? Because it can be uncomfortable, but it is exciting and inspiring when you see yourself adapt and evolve as you grow through your career.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think that point that you make on like the why and let
Mm.
that guide a lot of the stuff that either come at your way or actively seeking things that are connected to your why is a way to yeah, not get caught up in like a specific role that you might be or a specific organization. So yeah, what happened after Melbourne Wood? Like you were Melbourne Water, and then sounds like you had a lot of interaction in different areas, even in within that organization. But like, how did you get to like work in 25 countries?
So I spent some time at Melbourne Water, and I really loved the aspect of particularly every water utility is different, but looking at a whole catchment perspective, and the connection with waterways that they have, which some of the other utilities are a bit more separate in that context.
Yep.
But I'd done work experience believe it or not, at a piling contractor. And
Oh,
I was wanting to get more experience in construction to complement having had some experience client side. So they approached me, and I went and spent 3 years there. And it was really interesting because we're traversing to geotechnical engineering for a second now, but while I was there, piling contractors is one of the unique industries where you do all the estimating, all the design, all the construction. And so you basically follow projects all the way through, whereas in
yeah.
one entity. And so loved that aspect. And I ended up working all over Australia with them, ended up getting a much stronger understanding of construction, obviously strengthened my geotechnical knowledge as well. I did that for a few years, and then another company that I'd done work experience with, Arup, approached me and asked me if I wanted to join them. And it was that point I thought, well, as a piling contractor, I could have been a technical specialist in one specific area. And for a lot of people, that's fantastic because you have a drive in one area. For me, I wanted to continue to spread my wings and learn new things. And I joined Arup in their civil infrastructure team back there, and ended up working on projects in Dubai, projects around Australia, still based in Melbourne, but looking at a lot of site development. So the docklands in Melbourne, worked on the MCG development as they prepared for the Commonwealth Games. Worked on a lot of water projects, but I was missing that. It was interesting. I'd worked for a client, worked for a contractor, was working for a consultant, and I was missing that personal connection to water. So whilst I was exposed to it to a certain degree, I wasn't fully embracing and able to connect to it fully, and started to get connected to WaterAid at that point. So Arup had a global partnership with WaterAid. I started championing that and set up their fundraising committee in Victoria and chaired that. And then was fortunate enough to get selected to go over to India on one of their trips. And that really reignited and brought me back to my why. And around that time, Arup had a very tiny water business in Adelaide at the time, actually, believe it or not. But no water business anywhere else in the region. And
Oh,
they're
okay.
looking to expand. And
Yeah.
the manager in Adelaide approached me and asked me if I'd like to start a water business in Victoria. And so at the time I was thinking, I've spent a little bit of time at Melbourne Water, but I've worked in all sorts of other areas. I wouldn't have called myself a water specialist at that point, but I thought, I love water, I love people. What have I got
It's
to
an
lose?
opportunity.
It's an opportunity. And so started this team in Melbourne, and literally I started identifying, and I worked out who in Arup knew people in the water space, which wasn't many back then. So we had very few contacts, no real track record. But I started looking up the names of the different managing directors in the water utilities, in the government agencies, and in a lot of instances, cold calling and to set up a meeting.
Amazing.
And to be honest, the first couple of meetings I had, some of the terminologies they were even using, I hadn't heard of. And I was literally going away, researching them. And before you knew it, I was talking very knowledgeably about water, learning lots from great people, and starting this journey of understanding what the challenges are and drivers are from some of the most senior leaders. And at that stage, we were entering, we were in a major drought in Victoria and a lot of Australia. And so I looked at the fact, well, what are the gaps in that space? And there were lots of consultants that could design pipelines and pump stations and treatment plants, but recycled water had never really been delivered. And we started to position ourselves as the thought leaders in recycled water in the Victorian market and the Australian market. We set up an event on recycled water at Arup. We approached every golf course, every council, every private school, every sports venue in Greater Melbourne, invited them along. We organised sponsorships and contractors to speak and technology providers. Anyway, we had this great event where we started to really drive the conversation. And before I knew it, we were in the papers, on the radio.
Wow.
suddenly becoming one of the thought leaders in this space.
Yes.
And then off the back of that, we did a study on the Melbourne Sports Precinct, because the MCG, Melbourne Cricket Ground, and the Melbourne Olympic Park, which is where the Australian Open's held, were two
Yeah.
of the highest water users in Melbourne. Did a recycled water study for them and identified a sewer mining scheme and a stormwater harvesting scheme. And that led us down a path of then delivering two of the most innovative recycled water schemes in Australia, arguably globally. And basically it came off the back of stepping out of my comfort zone and saying, well, I want to have a go, not being afraid to talk to people, not being afraid to try and champion a new initiative, and then bringing the right people together to develop solutions. And look, I could keep going, but long story short, we ended up building a really successful business in Victoria around a range of really innovative spaces where a engineering consultant could be in the advisory space around recycled water, public-private partnerships. The Murray-Darling Basin was a big issue back there, so we're advising on the shaping of that. And built a business. I then was invited to move to Singapore, set up our Southeast Asia water business, probably using a similar approach, but loved that because every country was so different, unique,
Yeah.
lots of experience with World Bank and Asian Development Bank and not-for-profits, but also investors and advisors around city planning. Then moved to Sydney and took on the Australasia water business role for Arup. And basically we, over time, played a key role in growing the business into New Zealand, across most of the cities in Australia, and then into Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, etc. So that was the journey. But throughout that time, I kept working with WaterAid, kept working with Engineers Without Borders, kept working with other groups, World Toilet Organization, etc. And I found that it kept me alive and passionate by continually having a job that I was inspired in a developed world context and probably in an Australian context, but having that cultural connection and the sort of personal connection with people in a range of different areas. And so I don't know if that's probably the quick version, but it was a
Wow, it's so
journey of
interesting.
passion, really.
Yes. I think as you say, like we come back to that why, like even though you were doing amazing things with Arab, that you also kept that connection with what really drives you in the social, and of course with the rest of the stuff that you were doing in Arab as well, with your environmental side of things. And is fascinating to know kind of that transition from utility into contractor, and I can see like that advantage of like learning of the whole project life cycle of something that when you're in a big organization, you might be like dealing with one stage and then you maybe move to another, but takes a lot of time to get an experience across the whole thing, and then moving more on the consulting space. So that's certainly fascinating, and all from the same field of engineering, which is you mentioned it before, like that some people might be really happy to stay in the technical side of things, and that is their why, and that's kind of
Yes.
what needs to drive people. People might be more driven by like the problem solving and getting into the nitty gritty, and I have a lot of colleagues that are like that, and it's
Mm,
amazing.
it is.
Um, yeah, I was curious in these shifts that you kind of talk a little bit to. What has that taught you about the flexibility of the engineering career? That really, as an engineer, you can do so many different things that is not really the most kind of traditional path, I'll say it like that some engineers took on.
Great question. And I think that particularly in water, and obviously our session today is about water, but we've talked a bit about the social and environmental and technical and economic impact of our roles. But there is a huge diversity, and we don't need to spend, if we don't want to, we don't need to spend our entire career in a utility or a consultant or a contractor or an investor or a developer or on the government side in policy. We can traverse those areas and they round our capability out when we do. And you touched on the fact that I've been able to work in 25 countries, but worked across most of those areas. More recently,
Yeah.
I spent time at Unity Water as an executive, but the last 2 years I've been founding a company which is an infrastructure developer working over in the Pilbara, and that's been so amazing because we've been creating projects from scratch, bringing government, bringing industry, bringing First Nations, bringing investors together to look at new solutions. And and I'm learning so much. But I never would have learnt or developed in that way if I hadn't sort of taken a leap of faith.
Yes,
And
yes. And I think it's being flexible and understanding that your skills will take you in different paths, and like the some stuff that we learn are very important in our engineering kind of degrees. I'm an engineer as well, but at the end of the day we also learn how to learn. And
mm,
like I spent some time in research and I learned how to learn, and I don't
that's good.
know many stuff about many topics. Even in these podcasts I just interview people and I have no idea about certain things, but I can read
Mm,
and I can learn, and I trust that I
yes.
can get there with time. So I think it's just having that trust in your abilities as well, and then
Mm,
jumping to the opportunities that has provided you with so many things in your career. And like even now you're saying like I'm learning so much, that is just so empowering, because that's what many people might want to do, is like just keep learning and keep being active and like stretching yourself all the time. So
yeah.
that's really interesting. Yes.
And I think that learning point is really, really good, Jess, in that our minds are created to learn and create and be stimulated. And the question around how we learn and how open we are to learning is a really important one. It doesn't matter what stage we're at. We learn when we ask questions. And one of the things I learned when I started working in developing countries was that we don't come in with a solution. We come in and understand context. And to understand context, we need to ask questions and listen and be really open to the fact that when you're in a group, the collective brain power of that group doesn't matter how intelligent you are, that the concepts that you and solutions that you can create are so much more holistic, and you'll get so much more buy-in when you do it collaboratively.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that has consistently come up as well in the conversations here, is like
Mm,
especially in other countries and even in our own communities, we don't
yeah.
get we shouldn't come and like say this is your solution, this is what you need technically because we do this now. Like because that's not the way to approach some of the communities there. You started mentioning already kind of the work you're doing in the Pilbara, and I really wanted to spend some time there. So, like, yeah, you have been working in your own business legacy for 2 years. Yeah, tell us a little bit more of what's happening in that region. What took you to work there? Like, what are you up to up there?
Yeah, so one of the things we were looking at was where are the biggest challenges in Australia? And I think we've got fantastic water utilities, and particularly in the urban environment, we've got a density of population and regulatory structure and capabilities that are very effective. But when we looked outside of the cities, we started to notice that there's a complexity of problems in certain parts of Australia that where they overlay and overlap each other and need different solutions. So if I use the Pilbara as an example, we have First Nations communities that have been there for thousands of years that have incredible knowledge of land and water, but have also felt in a number of instances disempowered, or they've had challenging engagement with government or with the resources sector on projects on their country. So we've got First Nations communities. We've got a huge environmental challenge where groundwater has been over abstracted and demands continuing to increase. Reliabilities, we're having increased in periods of too much and too little. So the groundwater can't be relied on anymore. So we've had environmental damage. We've got industry. We've got one of the sort of, it's really the economic powerhouse of Australia in a lot of ways. We've got
Yeah.
huge iron ore industry, lithium, but there's also a significant focus by the state and federal government on decarbonisation projects such as solar, wind, hydrogen, green iron, green steel, and industry. Typically, WA is a little bit unique in that in the past, the WA government, Water Corporation, hasn't been involved in a lot of the industrial water infrastructure. They've
Yep.
sort of put the onus on industry to solve it. But what's worked for individual organizations in the past isn't working anymore. So they can't just extract groundwater. The mining companies, which have made significant profits, haven't necessarily and have been able to fund projects in the past. That model doesn't work for the decarbonisation projects coming through. So we looked at this gap and thought, well, the government and Water Corporation don't have a mandate to resolve it. Industry isn't able to solve it by itself.
By
First
itself.
Nations need to partner differently. So created a developer. We set up a partnership with Suez. And we spent the last 2 years working very closely with Nalama Aboriginal Corporation, which represents one of the significant First Nations groups up there between Karratha and Port Hedland. And the model essentially is we'll develop a project in partnership with Nalama, in partnership with Suez, providing common user infrastructure to decarbonisation projects, to iron ore, to lithium, to help catalyse the economy, seawater desalination to protect the environment, significant economic benefits for First Nations, and really helping the government solve a big challenge as well. So from a state and federal perspective, unlocking industry, unlocking First Nations partnerships is a huge plus. So it takes a while to explain because there's lots of stakeholders and lots
Oh,
of different elements to it, but
yeah.
it's coming together beautifully, and we're really excited about how it's evolving.
No, I think it's great. And once again, it's really interesting to see where the motivation for that came. And it's like, let's just see where the biggest challenges are and where that gap is, especially like in a state with such big territory as WA that the water utility that covers the whole state hasn't like been involved in that. Like it's not their role, like in the way that the legislation is put in, and really identifying that these industries are not going anywhere, of course, because they are the powerhouse of many of the stuff in our economy. But how
Mm,
can we help them and be there to connect that
yep.
through many different things in the decarbonization stuff? So, and it's a great model, like with, of course, including industry, First Nations, government, and all of that. Do you think that model is something that we should be doing more, and what do we need to replicate that in other parts of the country?
Yes, definitely. It's interesting if we look at where there's a lot of water and sanitation challenges in Australia. It's often in some of the really remote communities,
Yes.
and it can be hard for the water utilities to service them. It can be hard around funding as well. But often in those really remote areas, we have significant industry, and industry often
Mm.
has funding and has huge needs for water as well. So we see a synergy between the fact in these remote regional areas, First Nations opportunities, industrial opportunities, integrated solutions, bringing in where needed, bringing in private investment so that that can help unlock the benefits is definitely replicable. We're already looking at other locations and in the early stages of development for some of those, but it's a model that we've created that we think can be applied elsewhere, and we're quite keen to see how we can leverage the learnings for broader benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, I think you do a very good connection there, like between the remote areas where some of the populations still in Australia have issues in water and sanitation services. And then there might be other things there and industries and other places, other institutions around that area that if they work together, they can really work on that. And it talks back to that social aspect that has been like a constant in your career as well. So it's like, how do we bring that here as well, which is wonderful to see. Um,
Avi, can I share a brief story? It's
yes,
yes.
please. Yeah,
So it was interesting when we first created the partnership, and we had our first steerco steering committee meeting for the project. We had Legacy there, Suez, and Nalma Aboriginal Corporation, and we're in a boardroom meeting in Perth, so quite formal corporate office. And then we had three steering committee members from Nalama, and Patrick, one of the members, said, "I'd like to sing a song." And it wasn't planned. It wasn't part of the agenda or anything like
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
And it was just he sang a beautiful song from their community talking about the importance of water. And he was using the two boomerangs as an instrument as he was singing. And I thought, how amazing is this? Like this coming together of cultures where, yes, we're trying to solve a complex water issue, and we've got experts around the technical and financial and environmental, but and it's the personal interaction and people's passion that are the memories that you take with you in your career, and that you hold on to as you walk through complex journeys.
Absolutely. And I think it would have been a wonderful way of connecting. At the end of the
Mm,
day, we're all humans, and like, and probably some of those meetings are not super smooth, but like if you remember and you put that as a ground ground
Mm.
floor for it, then it's a lot easier to come up with like solutions for different things. So that's
Yes,
wonderful. Thank
definitely.
you for sharing that. Then you have seen the water sector from many angles we have talked now. What is the biggest shift you think it needs to happen next?
Yes, I think that's the single biggest shift's a big question, isn't it? I mean, one of the areas I think for me is what are the different ways we can develop holistic solutions? So I look at the Nalama Water Project as a good example of that. But how can we learn around? I think we're on a journey in Australia around really actively trying to consider the cultural aspect of water and engage with communities so that we're all going on the journey together. As part of the development that we're working on in the Pilbara, we spent a lot of time looking at some of the best models around the world in Canada and New Zealand and elsewhere, and then working together. But for me, what are the models where we can solve multiple challenges and how do we think outside the box to do that? We've seen, I worked on a project in Pakistan a few years ago where we were looking at a huge challenge they had there around, interestingly enough, in Karachi, they have the highest concentrations of cows in the world. And
Okay.
a few years ago, they moved them all out of the city into this really concentrated area. So it's almost a little bit, it's a bit sad, but a little bit like a cattle, like you see hens in hen farms where they're sort of all limited space. But
Yeah.
manure was literally running it through open drains through the streets, straight into the ocean and causing public health issues around people in the community, causing huge environmental issues.
Environmental.
And they were looking at how do we solve this? And we worked with the community to look at, well, how do we build a waste to energy facility, capturing the manure so it wasn't going through the streets, bringing in green waste and the organic waste from the city itself, and helping solve an environmental issue, a public health issue, but also Karachi was having huge issues with brownouts because they had a shortage of electricity. And so
Yeah.
you sit there and look at these sites and go, if we look at things in a box and go, well, what's the one problem I need to solve? Like, is it water from site A to site B, or other stakeholders? Are there issues around energy? Are there issues around waste? Are there issues around biodiversity? And I think that holistic thinking, as we plan for cities or as we plan for communities or as we develop together, where we're not just a water industry, we're a holistic
Yeah.
solution for an ecosystem. And that circular economy approach, the bringing stakeholders together, and that any professional, we always like to work in the groups that we know. And I found the last 2 years really interesting because I've worked in a lot of different industries, but I'm a water person. So I spent a lot of my time at Australian Water Association conferences and all those events, which are wonderful. But all of a sudden I'm at decarbonisation conferences with energy experts and at mining conferences with mining experts and at First Nations conferences with learning about different aspects in those contexts. And as water people, how can we maintain our amazing networks, but how can we get out of our bubble and
Expand it.
start to be the
Yeah.
bridge? It'd be something that I think is a huge opportunity for us
No,
because
it's a great.
together we can do more.
Yeah, that's a great shift, really. People we know are connected to a lot of different aspects of the society, but really
Mm,
reaching out into finding those solutions where we solve the water problem, but we create value in other aspects as well.
yes, definitely.
This episode is proudly supported by the Chris Davis AM Fellowship, an initiative of the Australian Water Association. His legacy lives on through this fellowship, empowering efforts to keep his passion for innovation and community impact alive. We're honored to have the support of this fellowship this season too, as we continue to share stories that connect us all to water. Now, back to the episode. Then, how would you explain your work to your friend that knows nothing about what you do? How would you explain your work to them?
I mean, I describe when I talk about my why, I often talk about purpose, passion, and people. And so I talk about the fact that I'm passionate about water and the role it plays in people having clean drinking water, sanitation, health benefits, the role it plays in the environmental aspect, the role it plays in the economy, and the fact that I love working with people to develop solutions and having that sort of heart connection to the impact I'm making.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Is more than a job as it is just your passion and your purpose
Hmm.
that moves you. And you touched a little bit there, but this was very early on in the conversation. What would be your message to young water professionals who might be listening to you right now?
I watched it. It's we say my age a little bit, but I loved a movie when I was quite young, called Dead Poets Society, and there was an amazing teacher in that movie, and he used to say to his students, "Carpe diem," seize the day, and very inspiring teacher and movie. But for me, it's life goes fast, and don't look back on take opportunities along the way, because you don't want to look back and go, I wish I'd tried that, or I wish I'd done that, or even the missteps that you make, or the roles that you take aren't quite perfect, or the people challenging relationships you have. We can choose to grow from them, or we can choose to let them sort of crush us.
Yeah.
And so live your dreams, step outside your comfort zone. Don't let your failures crush you, but let them sort of shape you and define you into who you can be, because life is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and our career of water is a wonderful experience if we embrace and take it on with passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And this one, I'll finish off with that. Always ask it to my guest. Of course, we have been talking about this, but like I just have to keep the flow so people don't feel like I'm changing too many things. Why do you work in the water sector?
Good question. I think I've probably talked about it a lot in
Yes, we
different
did.
ways. But for me, it's people, it's passion, it's purpose, it's the fact that through simple solutions, we can go into a community and we can be the difference between life and death. We can be the difference between kids going to school and not going to school. We can bring joy and hope to communities around us, and we can be inspired by other passionate people. We're in an industry that isn't just about solving problems. It's about genuinely being inspired about what we do. And I talked about the AW Extreme Water Association conferences. I always love going there because you meet like-minded people who are there
Yes,
for a reason, and they're not just there for a job or there for money. They're there for a reason.
that's right. No, thank you. And you're right. We talk about this the whole episode, but like we needed one answer also like to finish off.
Of
So
course, of
um
course.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. It was really such an inspiring conversation to just learn, to lean into your skills, to just take those opportunities to like take a leap, and like give yourself a chance to explore different things that you never know where they're gonna take you, and also to enjoy the ride, as you said, and like and live the dream, and also owning our mistakes and learning from them. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Jess, and it was great to spend some time with you.
It was great. Yeah, I learned so much. Yeah, and thank you for listening and everyone to be part of our community. Please share this. Like this is such a good conversation. Please share it around with your colleagues and with other people within your networks. Because it is all about the why. So like if this helps you getting involved into your own why and finding out what motivates you, then that'll be great. If you have any feedback or ideas of new topics, you can always click in there, send us a message link that is in the description. And like, yeah, we love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to follow us in all our podcast platforms and in social media on LinkedIn to learn more ways to connect and keep learning from this. Keep that curiosity flowing, and I'll see you next time.